Hello guys, we now begin our journey into the cold. We leave behind the American frontier and travel north, far north, beyond the reach of civilization, beyond the tree line to the Arctic. A place so harsh, so unforgiving, that simply surviving a single night seems impossible. Yet for thousands of years, the Inuit people, often called Eskimos, not only survived here, but thrived, building homes from the very thing that should have killed them: ice. Picture this: you're standing on an endless expanse of white. Snow and ice stretch in every direction to the horizon. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero, and that's before the wind chill. The sun, if it appears at all during these winter months, hangs low on the horizon for just a few hours before disappearing again. And tonight, you're going to sleep inside a dome made entirely of frozen blocks of snow. An igloo, a house of ice in the middle of a frozen wasteland. The reality is simple. Everything about this environment wants to kill you. The cold will freeze your flesh in minutes if exposed. The wind will strip away your body heat faster than you can generate it. And yet, the Inuit discovered something remarkable. Ice, when used correctly, doesn't trap the cold, it traps the warmth. Inside an igloo, with nothing but body heat and a small oil lamp, the temperature could rise to a comfortable level, while just outside, the world was locked in temperatures that would kill an unprepared person within an hour. Before we begin this journey into one of the most extreme sleeping environments humans have ever conquered, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And please drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our community spread across the world. Now, settle back, slow your breathing, and prepare to experience what it was like to sleep warm and comfortable in a house made of ice, in the coldest place on Earth. The survival wisdom you're about to discover has been refined over thousands of years. Let's begin. You stand on the frozen sea ice, the Arctic Ocean solid beneath your feet. This is your world now, a realm of white and blue and grey, where the line between sky and ground often disappears in blowing snow. The wind cuts across the open ice with nothing to slow it, a constant howl that you feel as much as hear. Your face, even protected by your fur-lined hood, stings from the cold. Your breath freezes instantly into ice crystals that cling to your beard and eyelashes. Here's what historians and anthropologists emphasize about the Arctic environment. It's not just cold, it's hostile in ways that go beyond temperature. The sun disappears for months during the polar winter, plunging the world into darkness, broken only by moonlight, starlight, and the eerie dance of the aurora borealis.
The psychological impact of living in perpetual darkness, combined with temperatures that can drop to 70 below zero, would drive most modern people insane within weeks. Detailed accounts from early Arctic explorers describe the shock of encountering this environment. European and American expeditions, equipped with the best technology of their time, wooden ships, wool clothing, canned food, often ended in disaster. Men froze to death, lost their minds, resorted to cannibalism. Entire crews vanished into the ice, never to be seen again. These were experienced sailors and soldiers, and the Arctic defeated them utterly. Yet the Inuit had lived here for thousands of years, not just surviving, but creating a rich culture, raising families, telling stories, laughing and living full lives in conditions that killed outsiders. The difference wasn't physical. The Inuit weren't biologically adapted to cold any more than Europeans. The difference was knowledge, accumulated over countless generations, tested and refined until every technique represented the absolute optimal solution to the challenges of Arctic survival. A quirky observation from anthropological records: early explorers often refused to adopt Inuit survival techniques, considering them primitive or beneath their dignity. They insisted on using European methods, heavy wool clothing that absorbed sweat and then froze, canvas tents that provided no insulation, and dietary habits that didn't provide enough calories for extreme cold. Meanwhile, the Inuit wore carefully designed fur clothing, built igloos that actually worked as shelters, and ate a high-fat diet that kept their bodies functioning. The explorers died. The Inuit thrived. You picture yourself now as part of an Inuit hunting party, learning their ways, adopting their wisdom. You've spent the day hunting seals on the ice, a grueling process that involved waiting motionless beside a breathing hole for hours, harpoon ready, until finally a seal surfaced and you struck. The seal now lies on your sled, its body already starting to freeze solid in the brutal cold. This animal represents life. Its meat will feed your family. Its fat will fuel your lamp. Its skin will be sewn into clothing. Nothing is wasted. Nothing can be wasted. Waste means death. As the brief daylight fades, turning the sky a deep purple streaked with orange, you know you need shelter. The wind is picking up, and the temperature is dropping even further. You could try to make it back to your permanent winter camp, but it's too far, at least a full day's travel. You'll freeze before you get there. So you do what the Inuit have done for millennia. You build an igloo, not a crude snow fort, but a precisely engineered structure that will keep you alive through the night.
The landscape around you is deceptively uniform. To an outsider, it all looks the same, endless snow and ice. But you've been taught to read subtle differences. You're looking for the right kind of snow, not the loose, powdery stuff that blows around in the wind, not the hard, icy crust that forms on exposed surfaces. You need snow that's been compressed by wind, dense and slightly granular, the consistency that the Inuit call pukingajuk. This snow can be cut into blocks that hold their shape and bond together when stacked. You find a suitable drift and begin to test it with your snow knife, a long curved blade traditionally made from walrus ivory, though yours is metal, acquired through trade. The blade slides into the snow with just the right resistance. Perfect. You begin cutting blocks, each one about 3 feet long, 2 feet high, and 8 inches thick. The blocks are surprisingly heavy, dense with compacted ice crystals. Each one weighs 40 or 50 pounds. You'll need about 60 of them to build a sleeping igloo for one person, more if you're sheltering a family. Historians note that igloo construction was a skill that took years to master. It wasn't just about stacking blocks of snow. It was about understanding snow's structure and properties, about knowing how to shape each block so it would support the ones above it, about reading the wind and positioning the entrance correctly. A poorly built igloo would collapse, potentially killing everyone inside. A well-built igloo was a marvel of engineering, a self-supporting dome that could withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds and create a livable space from frozen water. You begin laying the first course of blocks in a circle about 10 feet in diameter for a one-person shelter. But here's the crucial trick that makes an igloo work, the detail that separates it from a simple pile of blocks of snow. You don't stack the blocks straight up in circular rows. Instead, you cut the first row at an angle, creating a spiral ramp. Each subsequent block is placed slightly higher and more inward than the previous one, following this spiral pattern upward. The structure naturally forms a dome, each block leaning against its neighbors, the whole thing held together by precisely calculated angles and the way the blocks freeze together at their contact points. A quirky but fascinating detail from Inuit oral traditions. Master igloo builders could construct a shelter in under an hour, working alone in near darkness, their hands moving from muscle memory developed over decades of practice. Young boys would start practicing at age 5 or 6, building tiny igloos for play. By their teenage years, they were expected to be able to build a survival shelter alone in a storm, in the dark. The stakes were absolute. A bad igloo meant death. A good igloo meant survival. There was no middle ground, no partial credit. As you work, placing block after block, the dome takes shape around you. You're building from the inside, which seems counterintuitive but makes perfect sense once you understand the technique. You can see exactly how each block fits, can make tiny adjustments, can ensure that every piece is positioned correctly. The wind howls outside, but already, even with the dome only half complete, you feel the difference. The wind can't reach you directly anymore. The space is starting to trap a tiny bit of warmth from your body heat and exertion. You continue working, shaping each block slightly with your knife so it fits perfectly against its neighbors. The spiral continues upward, each row leaning more steeply inward. You can feel the structure becoming self-supporting, the blocks locked in place by their mutual pressure. This is corbelled architecture at its finest. Each stone, or in this case, ice block, supporting the ones above it through careful placement and the principles of compression. You place the final block, the keystone, at the top of the dome. It's cut slightly larger than the hole remaining, so you have to trim it from inside, shaving off snow with your knife until it drops snugly into place, locking the entire structure together. The moment it seats properly, you feel the igloo settle, all the forces distributing evenly throughout the dome. It's done. In the span of 90 minutes, you've created a shelter from nothing but snow blocks, using tools made from animal bones and your knowledge of ancient techniques. But the igloo isn't complete yet. You still need to create the entrance tunnel, and this is more important than it might seem. You dig a tunnel into the snow, angling it downward and then up into the igloo floor. The entrance ends up lower than the main floor level, and this creates what's called a cold trap. Cold air, being denser than warm air, will sink into this tunnel and stay there, while the warm air inside the dome rises and is retained. It's a simple principle of physics, but its application here is brilliant. The tunnel also blocks wind completely, creating a double barrier between you and the lethal environment outside. Inside the igloo now, you begin your preparations for the night. First, you use your knife to smooth the interior walls, running your hands over the surface. Your body heat, transferred through your fur mittens, slightly melts the surface of the blocks. This creates a thin glaze of ice that serves multiple purposes. It strengthens the structure, bonding the blocks more firmly. It creates a smooth vapor barrier that helps manage moisture, and it gives the walls a polished, reflective quality that will make the most of your lamplight. You create a raised sleeping platform at the back of the igloo, piling up snow and packing it firm. This platform is elevated about 2 feet above the entrance tunnel level,
which means it sits in the warmest zone of the igloo. Remember, warm air rises, so by sleeping on this raised platform, you're positioning yourself in the warmest possible location. The temperature difference between the tunnel entrance and your sleeping platform can be 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, all within the same small structure. Next, you cut a small ventilation hole at the very top of the dome, just big enough to fit your thumb through. This hole is critical. As your lamp burns and you breathe, you'll consume oxygen and produce carbon dioxide and water vapor. Without ventilation, you could suffocate or create so much moisture that the interior would become damp, and dampness in the Arctic is a death sentence. But the hole can't be too large or you'll lose too much heat. It's a delicate balance, one that the Inuit have perfected over thousands of years.
You bring in your supplies through the entrance tunnel. Your sleeping furs, carefully kept dry and rolled tight. Your kulik, the traditional soapstone oil lamp that will provide both light and heat. Your bag of seal oil to fuel the lamp. Your food for the evening, frozen seal meat that you'll warm by the lamp. Every item has been carefully selected, tested by generations of use. Nothing extra, nothing unnecessary. In the Arctic, weight matters, and only the essential makes the journey. Now you light your kulik. The lamp is a shallow oval dish carved from soapstone, anywhere from 6 inches to 2 feet long, depending on its intended use. Yours is a traveling size, about 10 inches long. The dish is filled with rendered seal oil, thick and viscous in the cold. Along one edge, you've arranged a wick made from Arctic cotton, a tundra plant with fuzzy seed heads that work perfectly for this purpose. Some Inuit also use moss or even dried grass, but Arctic cotton is preferred for its clean, steady burn. You strike sparks from a piece of iron pyrite against flint, directing them onto a bit of dried fungus that catches fire easily. Once you have a tiny flame, you carefully transfer it to the lamp wick. The wick catches, and a small flame springs to life, feeding on the seal oil. The flame is modest, no bigger than what you'd get from a large candle, but in the sealed space of the igloo, it makes an enormous difference. Here's what surprises most people about igloos, and what many early explorers never understood. You don't need a large fire. In fact, a large fire would be dangerous, potentially melting the interior walls catastrophically, or consuming too much precious oxygen. The tiny flame of the kulik, combined with your body heat, is sufficient to transform the space from deadly cold to survivable warmth. The secret lies in the insulation properties of snow and the efficiency of the dome shape. Detailed scientific studies of igloos conducted by researchers in the 20th century revealed the genius of their thermal design. The snow blocks, despite being made of ice crystals, actually contain millions upon millions of tiny air pockets trapped between the crystals. Air is an excellent insulator, one of the best natural insulators available. These trapped pockets create a barrier that dramatically slows heat transfer from inside to outside. The dome shape itself is structurally perfect, distributing weight evenly, so no single point bears excessive load. It's also thermally efficient, minimizing surface area relative to volume, which means less area for heat to escape through. And the smooth interior walls, now glazed from your touch, reflect radiant heat back into the living space rather than allowing it to be absorbed by the ice. Every aspect of the design serves multiple purposes, a masterclass in engineering developed through empirical testing over millennia.
You begin to arrange your sleeping area on the raised platform. First, you spread out a layer of willow branches that you gathered days ago and have been carrying on your sled. These create an initial barrier between you and the ice, providing both cushioning and insulation. On top of the willows, you lay your first caribou hide, fur side down. This creates a smooth surface and adds another layer of insulation. Then comes your main sleeping hide, a large caribou skin with the fur facing up. You lie directly on this fur, letting it cushion your body and trap warm air in its dense coat. Caribou fur is remarkable. Each hair is hollow, filled with air, making it extraordinarily insulating for its weight. A caribou hide can keep you warm in temperatures that would kill you if you were sleeping on any other surface. On top of you will go another caribou hide, this one also fur side up, creating a fur-to-fur sandwich with you in the middle. The Inuit learned that this configuration, fur against your skin on both sides, trapped the most heat and managed moisture the best. Your body naturally produces moisture through sweat and breathing, and this moisture needs somewhere to go. The fur wicks it away from your skin, preventing that deadly cycle where moisture cools you down as it evaporates. A quirky observation from anthropologists who lived with the Inuit in the early 20th century. The interior of an occupied igloo could reach temperatures of 50 or even 60 degrees Fahrenheit, while outside the temperature was 40 or 50 below zero. That's a temperature differential of almost 100 degrees, achieved with nothing but snow blocks, body heat, and a lamp flame smaller than what you'd find on a birthday cake. Some Inuit families would actually strip down to minimal clothing inside their igloos, comfortable enough to sit around in just thin inner garments while a blizzard raged outside.
you begin to remove your outer layer of fur clothing, but you do this carefully, methodically. Any ice crystals that have formed on the fur from your breath or exertion must be knocked off before they can melt. You take each garment outside through the tunnel and shake it vigorously, watching the ice crystals scatter and blow away in the wind. Only then do you bring it back inside and hang it on a drying rack you fashioned from a piece of driftwood.
This is absolutely crucial. Any moisture that gets into your clothing will freeze solid when you go back outside in the morning. And frozen clothing loses all its insulating value. Worse, it can actually draw heat away from your body, conducting cold directly to your skin. Everything must stay dry. The Inuit had a saying, "Sweat is death." In the Arctic, getting wet from any source, even your own perspiration, could kill you as surely as falling through the ice. Underneath your outer layer, you're wearing another caribou skin garment, this one with the fur facing inward against your skin. The Inuit learned that this two-layer system was optimal. The outer layer, fur out, provided wind protection and additional insulation. The inner layer, fur in, wicked moisture away from your skin and provided a comfortable surface against your body. Together, they created a microclimate that kept you warm without overheating, dry without being damp. Modern Arctic researchers have tested Inuit clothing designs against the best synthetic materials available, and the traditional furs still outperform everything else in extreme conditions. The only advantage modern materials have is lighter weight, but in terms of pure thermal efficiency and moisture management, caribou and sealskin clothing remain unsurpassed. The Inuit designed the perfect cold weather clothing system through thousands of years of trial and error, and we still haven't improved on it. You settle onto your sleeping platform now, and already you can feel the transformation. The interior of the igloo is still cold by normal standards, probably around 20 or 30 degrees Fahrenheit, but compared to the minus 40 or 50 outside, it feels almost balmy. Your body, which was in full survival mode just minutes ago, begins to relax. The immediate threat of freezing has receded. You're not just surviving anymore. You're actually approaching something like comfort. The kulik burns steadily, its small flame casting dancing shadows on the curved walls. The light reflects off the ice crystals in the snow blocks, making the interior glow with a soft, ethereal luminescence. It's beautiful in an otherworldly way, like being inside a pearl or a cloud. The walls seem to glow from within, the light diffusing through the translucent snow in a way that's impossible to describe adequately. It's a space that shouldn't exist, a warm bubble in a frozen world, and yet here you are, safe inside it. You prepare your evening meal now.
The seal meat is frozen solid, but you slice off thin strips with your knife and hold them near the lamp flame. The meat begins to thaw and warm, not cooking exactly, but losing its frozen hardness. You eat it this way, slightly warm, rich with fat. The flavor is strong, intensely marine, but your body craves it. The fat content is enormous compared to land animals, and that fat is what keeps you alive in the Arctic. Your body burns through calories at an incredible rate in the extreme cold, and only a high-fat diet can provide sufficient energy.
Historians studying Inuit diet were initially shocked by how much fat they consumed. Seal meat, whale blubber, fish oil. The traditional Arctic diet was probably 70 or 80% fat by calories. By modern nutritional standards, this seems insane, but in the Arctic, it was absolutely necessary. Carbohydrates and even protein alone couldn't provide enough concentrated energy. Only fat could fuel the body's constant battle against the cold. As you eat, you think about the seal you caught today and the rituals surrounding its death. The Inuit believed that animals gave themselves to hunters who showed proper respect. The hunt wasn't just a physical act, but a spiritual transaction. You thanked the seal for sacrificing itself, and tomorrow you'll make an offering of fresh water to its spirit, pouring a few drops on the ice. These rituals weren't superstition to the Inuit. They were recognition that survival depended on the continuation of animal populations, and that humans were part of a larger ecosystem, not its masters. The lamp flame flickers slightly, and you adjust the wick, trimming it with a small stick to keep it burning evenly. The quadlik requires constant attention. Too much wick exposed and the flame burns too hot, potentially melting the lamp or consuming oil too quickly. Too little wick and the flame goes out. It's a balance, like everything in Arctic survival, and you've been taught how to read the flame, how to keep it in that perfect zone where it provides maximum heat and light for minimum oil consumption. As the hours pass, the interior of the igloo continues to warm. The tiny heat from the lamp, trapped by the insulating snow walls, accumulates in the space. The glazed interior walls help retain this heat, reflecting it back rather than absorbing it. And your own body heat, substantial when you're wrapped in furs, adds to the warming effect. The temperature on your sleeping platform gradually climbs to 40 degrees, then 45. It's a remarkable transformation. You lie back on your caribou fur bed, pulling the top hide over yourself. The fur is thick and soft, the hair dense enough that you can barely see the skin beneath. This caribou was killed in autumn, when the animals have their thickest winter coats, and the hide reflects that. Each hair is hollow, an evolutionary adaptation that provides maximum insulation for minimum weight, perfect for animals that need to survive Arctic winters while remaining mobile enough to migrate and escape predators. The comfort is profound and unexpected. You're lying on fur, covered in fur, inside a structure made of snow, heated by a lamp flame smaller than your thumb, and yet you're genuinely warm. Not just not freezing, but actually warm, in a way that makes you want to stay still and rest. Your body recognizes that it's safe to shut down the extreme metabolic processes it uses to maintain temperature in crisis conditions. It's safe to sleep deeply. It's safe to truly rest.
Outside, the wind howls, a sound like a living thing in pain. You can hear it whistling across the surface of your igloo, but the dome shape sheds it efficiently, the smooth curves giving the wind nothing to catch on, nothing to tear at. Inside, the sound is muffled to a distant whisper, more like white noise than a threat. The igloo creates a bubble of quiet in a loud world, a refuge not just from cold, but from the constant assault of Arctic wind. You think about the other hunters in your party, spread out across the ice, each in their own igloo that they built when darkness fell. Tomorrow you'll reunite, compare your catches, continue the journey back to the winter camp. But tonight each of you sleeps alone in your own private shelter, connected by shared knowledge and shared culture, but physically isolated in the vast frozen landscape. It's a solitude that would drive some people mad, but for the Inuit it's normal, even comforting. You're never truly alone when you carry the accumulated wisdom of your ancestors. The lamp flame dances, hypnotic in its movement. You watch it for a while, letting your mind drift. You think about your family back at the winter camp, your wife and children waiting for your return. You think about the stories you'll tell about this hunt, the seal that appeared at just the right moment, the perfect snow you found for building tonight's igloo. You think about the next generation learning these skills, your own children practicing igloo construction, ensuring that the knowledge continues forward in time. Historians emphasize that Inuit culture was fundamentally about knowledge transfer. There were no books, no written instructions. Everything was taught person to person, parent to child, elder to youth, through demonstration and practice and patient correction. A child might watch their parent build 100 igloos before being allowed to try on their own. They might spend years learning to read snow, to judge wind, to understand ice conditions. The learning never really stopped. Even elders in their 70s and 80s were still refining their skills, still passing on wisdom. The lamp has burned down slightly, and you add more seal oil from your bag, using a small spoon made of musk ox horn. The oil is cold and thick, almost the consistency of butter, but once it reaches the flame, it liquefies and feeds the wick. You'll need to refill the lamp once or twice more during the night, a small price to pay for warmth and light. Some Inuit could sleep through the night without refilling, But you're being cautious, making sure you have more than enough oil. Running out would mean darkness and rapidly dropping temperature, a dangerous situation. You adjust your position on the sleeping platform, and the caribou fur rustles beneath you. The sound is pleasant, comforting, familiar. You've slept on caribou fur your entire life. It's the smell and sound and feel of home, of safety, of family. Even here, hundreds of miles from your permanent dwelling, the fur connects you to everything you know and love. It's more than just insulation. It's a piece of your culture, your identity, wrapped around you like a hug.
The temperature has stabilized now. The igloo has reached its equilibrium, where the heat input from lamp and body exactly matches the heat loss through the walls and ventilation hole. This balance point is remarkably stable. The igloo won't get much warmer, but it won't get colder either, as long as you maintain the lamp and keep the ventilation clear. It's a self-regulating system, elegant in its simplicity. You begin to feel drowsy, the warmth and comfort working on your body like a drug. Your eyelids grow heavy, your thoughts start to scatter and drift. This is deep relaxation, the kind that only comes when you're truly safe and warm after being in genuine danger. Your body knows the difference between bedroom comfort and life-saving shelter, and it responds accordingly. The relief is almost overwhelming. As you drift towards sleep, you're aware of the sounds around you, the soft hiss of the lamp, the distant moan of wind outside, filtered and muffled by snow walls, your own breathing, slow and regular, the tiny pops and creaks of the igloo settling, the ice shifting microscopically as it adjusts to its new configuration. These are all good sounds, normal sounds, the sounds of a functioning shelter doing its job. You think about the generations before you who slept in igloos just like this one, your parents and grandparents, great-grandparents stretching back in an unbroken line for thousands of years, all of them perfecting the techniques, discovering the optimal strategies, learning through mistakes that sometimes cost lives, but ultimately built a body of knowledge that made survival possible. You're the beneficiary of all that accumulated wisdom, and you feel the weight and privilege of that inheritance. The Inuit word for igloo, igala, simply means house, not ice house or snow house, just house. Because to the Inuit, these structures weren't exotic or primitive or temporary. They were homes, real homes, where families lived, where children were born, where elders told stories, where life happened in all its fullness. The material might have been snow, but the function was identical to any house, anywhere.
to shelter people from the environment and provide a space for human life to flourish. You pull the caribou hide up to your chin, cocooning yourself in fur and warmth. Your body has fully adjusted now. You're not cold at all. In fact, you're so comfortable that it's hard to believe you're inside a structure made of frozen water, sitting on the ice of a frozen ocean in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The contrast between your current state and the lethal conditions just a few feet away is extraordinary, and it fills you with gratitude for the knowledge that makes this possible.
Sleep is very close now. Your breathing has slowed to the deep, regular rhythm of approaching unconsciousness. Your muscles are relaxed, your mind quiet. The lamp continues to burn, a small, persistent flame holding back the darkness and the cold. Tomorrow you'll wake, dismantle the igloo, or leave it for another traveller, and continue your journey. But that's tomorrow. Tonight there's only warmth and safety and the gentle slide into sleep. As consciousness fades, your last thought is about the miracle of adaptation, about how humans found ways to survive everywhere on Earth, even places that seemed designed to kill us. The igloo is proof of what we can achieve when necessity drives innovation and generations refine solutions. It's not high technology or advanced science. It's deep knowledge, intimate understanding of materials and principles, applied with skill and passed down with care. And it works. After thousands of years, it still works perfectly. You sleep now, deeply and peacefully, while the Arctic wind howls outside and the stars wheel overhead in the long polar night. The igloo holds you safe, a bubble of warmth in the frozen darkness, a testament to human ingenuity and the incredible adaptive capacity of our species. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new cold, new tests of survival. But tonight you rest, secure in the knowledge that people have survived here for thousands of years, and you're part of that unbroken tradition. The lamp burns on, faithful and steady. The igloo stands firm, its dome shedding wind and holding heat, and you, wrapped in caribou fur on a bed of snow, sleep as comfortably as if you were in the finest bedroom in the world. Because, in a very real sense, you are. The igloo is the perfect bedroom for this environment, designed over millennia, tested against the ultimate judge of quality, survival. It passed that test thousands of times, and it passes again tonight, keeping you alive and warm when exposure would kill you in less than an hour. Sleep well, friend. Sleep warm. Sleep safe in your house of snow, in the heart of the Arctic, in the embrace of knowledge so old and so deep that it precedes history itself. The Inuit figured this out, and they've been sharing their wisdom ever since, teaching anyone willing to learn, showing the world that with understanding and respect for the environment, humans can live anywhere, even here, even now, even you.
Good night.
Thank you for traveling with us into the Arctic. If you enjoyed this journey through sleeping in ice igloos, please like the video and subscribe for more relaxing history. Comment below and let us know where you're listening from. Sleep peacefully, stay warm, and until our next adventure, rest easy, friends. See you on our next story.
Alright, guys, we now move on to our next story. We leave behind the frozen Eskimos and travel to the vast open plains of Texas and the American West. The year is 1870, and you're about to embark on one of the most grueling journeys in frontier history, a cattle drive stretching over 1,000 miles from the dusty ranches of southern Texas all the way north to the railheads of Kansas. Picture this: you're a cowboy, maybe 19 or 20 years old, signed up for 3 months of hard riding, harder sleeping, and barely any pay. You've been promised $30 a month if you make it to the end. The cattle, 3,000 head of ornery longhorns, are already getting restless in their holding pens. Tomorrow at dawn the drive begins, and tonight you're trying to figure out how you'll survive the next 90 days sleeping under nothing but the stars. The reality is simple. Cowboys didn't have tents. They didn't have cabins or shelters of any kind. They slept on the ground, fully exposed to rain, wind, heat, and cold. Their bed was a thin bedroll, their roof was the sky, and their alarm clock was either a boot to the ribs or the sound of cattle stampeding in the darkness. You probably won't sleep well on this journey, at least not by any civilized standard. But if you're tough enough, if you're lucky enough, you'll make it to Kansas with most of your fingers and toes intact. Before we ride out, take a moment to like this video if you're enjoying the journey, and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing the community that gathers around these stories. Now settle back, close your eyes if you want, and let your breathing slow. We're about to experience what it was like to sleep, or try to sleep, as a cowboy on the great cattle drives of the Old West. The adventure starts now, but the suffering never really ends.
You stand at the edge of the ranch, watching the trail boss organize the crew. There are 12 of you in total, not counting the cook. The trail boss is a weathered man in his 40s, scarred and sun-darkened, with eyes that have seen men die and cattle scatter. He's done this route 6 times before, and his word is law. Cross him, and you'll be left behind in hostile territory with nothing but your horse and whatever you can carry.
The crew is a mix of experienced hands and greenhorns like yourself. A couple of Mexican vaqueros who know more about cattle than anyone, but get paid less because of the color of their skin. A former slave, now free, who works twice as hard for the same respect. Two teenage boys, even younger than you, running from something back home, and a handful of drifters, men with no past they'll talk about, and no future they can see beyond the next payday. Here's what historians emphasize about these drives. They were brutal, democratic meritocracies. Your background didn't matter. Your education didn't matter. All that mattered was whether you could ride, whether you could work 18-hour days, and whether you could function on 3 hours of sleep. The trail broke men quickly. Within the first week, the weak ones would quit or get fired, left to walk back to civilization if they could find it. Detailed accounts from cowboys who kept diaries describe the strange mix of excitement and dread before a drive began. You knew you were about to embark on something epic, something you'd remember for the rest of your life, assuming you survived. But you also knew the statistics. Men died on these drives. They drowned crossing rivers. They got kicked by horses or gored by bulls. They died from snake bites, lightning strikes, and infected wounds. Some just vanished, wandering off during a night watch and never returning. A quirky detail from the historical record. Many cowboys wrote their names and hometowns on scraps of paper and pinned them inside their shirts before departing. That way, if they died along the trail, their bodies could be identified and their families notified. It was a grim ritual, but necessary. The trail was littered with graves marked only with piles of rocks or crude wooden crosses.
You picture yourself now, checking your gear one last time. Your saddle is worn but functional. Your bedroll consists of a single blanket, a top, and whatever clothes you own, all rolled tight and tied behind your saddle. You have a canteen, a tin cup, a plate, and eating utensils. A knife on your belt. Maybe a pistol if you're lucky, though ammunition is expensive, and most cowboys couldn't afford to waste bullets on practice. Your horse is everything. A good horse could save your life 12 times over. A bad horse could kill you. You've been assigned a string of 5 horses, rotated throughout the day, so no single animal gets too exhausted. You'll spend more time with these horses over the next 3 months than with any human being. You'll learn their personalities, their quirks, their limits, and they'll learn yours. The landscape stretches before you, endless and indifferent. Flat grasslands that seem to extend to the edge of the world. In the distance, dust devils spin lazily in the afternoon heat. The sky is blue, unmarred by clouds. It looks peaceful now, almost inviting, but you know better. That same sky will turn violent without warning. Those same grasslands will flood or burn or freeze, depending on the season and the mood of nature. Historians often romanticize the cattle drives, portraying them as adventures of freedom and masculinity. And there's some truth to that. You were, in a sense, free from the constraints of settled society, free from bosses and landlords in law, mostly. But you were also trapped by the need for money, trapped by the cattle that had to reach market, trapped by geography and weather and time. The freedom was real, but so was the cage. As the sun begins to set on this first evening, the trail boss calls everyone together. He outlines the route. 15 miles a day, every day, no matter what. The cattle will graze as they walk, but they can't stop for long or they'll lose weight. And weight is money. You'll start each morning at first light and work until the herd settles for the night. Then you'll take shifts on night watch, 2 hours on, 4 hours off, rotating through the crew. You do the math in your head. 2-hour night watch mean you'll get, at best, 6 hours of interrupted sleep per night. And that's if nothing goes wrong. When things go wrong, and they always do, you might go days with almost no sleep at all. The exhaustion will be cumulative, building day by day until your body moves by instinct alone, your mind too fogged to think clearly.
The trail boss finishes his speech with a warning. Any man who falls asleep on watch will be fired on the spot and left wherever we are. I don't care if it's the middle of Indian territory. You fall asleep, you walk home. The words hang in the air, heavy with consequence. Nobody questions them. Everyone understands. A sleeping dog means a stampede, and a stampede means death. You bed down that first night, still close to the ranch, the last night of relative comfort you'll have for months. Tomorrow, the real journey begins. Tomorrow, you'll learn what it means to sleep like a cowboy, which is to say, barely at all. You unroll your bedroll on the ground, and immediately you understand how inadequate it is. One wool blanket, heavy and scratchy. A canvas top meant to go underneath you to block moisture from the ground, though it's so thin you can feel every rock and root through it. And that's it. That's your entire sleeping system for the next 3 months. Here's a fact that appears in every authentic cowboy memoir. The bedroll was sacred. It was the one piece of personal gear that defined your existence on the trail. A good bedroll, properly maintained, could make the difference between functioning and breaking down. A wet or damaged bedroll meant misery, and misery led to mistakes, and mistakes on a cattle drive could be fatal. Detailed accounts describe the art of rolling and unrolling your bedding. You couldn't just throw it on the ground carelessly. You had to check for scorpions, snakes, fire ants, anything that might have taken up residence in the grass. Cowboys developed a ritual, shaking out the tarp, laying it carefully, checking the blanket for holes or damp spots. It sounds paranoid, but men had been bitten, stung, and killed by creatures that crawled into their bedding. The blanket itself was usually wool, which had the advantage of retaining some warmth even when wet, but wool was also heavy, scratchy, and collected every thorn and burr you passed during the day. By the end of a drive, your blanket would be so embedded with plant matter and dirt that it barely resembled fabric anymore. Some cowboys joked that their blankets could stand up on their own.
A quirky observation from the journals. Cowboys rarely washed their blankets during the drive. Water was too precious, time too limited, and honestly, everyone was so dirty that a clean blanket would have seemed out of place. You learned to live with the smell, with the grime, with the gradual transformation of your bedding into something that barely qualified as civilized. It was just one more degradation in a long list. You picture yourself now arranging your bedroll on a patch of relatively flat ground. The earth is hard, baked by the sun all day. You know it will leach the heat from your body all night, but there's nothing you can do about that. Some cowboys carried extra clothing to stuff under the tarp for padding, but most couldn't afford the weight. Every ounce mattered when you were living out of a saddlebag. Your saddle becomes your pillow. This is universal among cowboys. You can't leave your saddle lying on the ground. It would get damaged or stolen, so you sleep with it, your head resting against it. The leather is hard and smells of horse sweat, but it's familiar. The stirrups dig into your neck sometimes, but you learn to position yourself to avoid the worst of it. And in the morning, your saddle is right there, ready to go. Efficiency in everything. Historians noted that the saddle as pillow practice had another purpose. It kept your most valuable possession close. A horse could be replaced, eventually. A blanket could be borrowed or improvised. But a saddle was personal, fitted to you and your riding style. Losing your saddle meant losing your job, because you couldn't work without one and couldn't afford to buy a replacement. So you slept with it, guarded it, treated it better than you treated yourself. The tarp beneath you is supposed to keep moisture from soaking into your blanket, but it's only partially effective. If rain falls, the tarp helps, but water still finds ways to creep in around the edges. If the ground is wet from a previous rain, the tarp slows, but doesn't stop the dampness from seeping through. And if you're unlucky enough to bed down in a low spot, you might wake up in the middle of the night
lying in a puddle. One account from a cowboy on the Chisholm Trail describes waking up to find himself floating, literally. A flash flood had turned the campsite into a shallow lake while he slept. He grabbed his saddle and swam to higher ground, losing his blanket in the process. He spent the rest of the drive sleeping in his clothes, with no blanket at all, shivering through the nights, too proud or too stubborn to ask
You
for help.
imagine lying down now, head on your saddle, blanket pulled up to your chin. The ground is unforgiving beneath you. Your hip bone presses against a rock you missed in your inspection. Your shoulder finds a root. Your legs stretch out, but there's nowhere comfortable to put them. You shift, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt, but there isn't one. Eventually, you give up and just accept the discomfort. It's going to be a long night. The sky above is spectacular, you have to admit that. With no light pollution, the stars are so thick they look like glowing dust scattered across black velvet. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a river of light. You can see planets, satellites if you know where to look. Shooting stars streaking by every few minutes. It's beautiful in a way that makes you feel small and insignificant. But beauty doesn't keep you warm. Beauty doesn't cushion the hard ground. And beauty definitely doesn't protect you from the wind that's starting to pick up, cutting across the open prairie with nothing to slow it down. You pull the blanket tighter, but it's not enough. The wind finds every gap, every opening, and drives the cold against your skin. Historians often point out that cowboys developed a kind of stoic relationship with discomfort. They didn't complain, or at least they didn't complain seriously. Grumbling was allowed, even expected, but genuine complaints were seen as weakness. You were supposed to endure silently to prove you were tough enough for the life. The culture enforced a brutal standard of masculinity that left no room for vulnerability. Around you, the other cowboys are settling in. You hear the rustle of tarps, the creak of saddles being positioned. Someone curses quietly as they discover a cactus too close to their bedroll. Someone else is already snoring, a deep, rattling sound that carries across the camp. The cook has banked the fire, leaving just enough coals to restart it in the morning. The cattle are quiet, for now, a dark mass in the distance. And you lie there, staring up at the stars, trying to convince your body to relax, trying to trick your mind into believing this is restful. But sleep doesn't come easily. The ground is too hard, the air too cold, your thoughts too active. You think about the months ahead. You think about home, if you have one. You think about the $30 waiting at the end, assuming you make it. The first night on the trail is always the hardest, veterans say. Your body hasn't adapted yet. You're still remembering what a real bed feels like, what a roof over your head feels like. After a few weeks, you'll forget. Your standards will drop so low that this, sleeping on rocks with a thin blanket under an indifferent sky, will seem normal. You'll stop noticing the discomfort because it becomes constant, and constant discomfort eventually fades into background noise.
That adaptation hasn't happened yet. Tonight, every rock digs deeper, every gust of wind cuts colder, every sound makes you more alert instead of less. You're still civilized enough to suffer. Give it time. The trail will strip that civilization away, leaving only the raw animal core of survival. You've barely drifted into an uneasy sleep when a boot nudges your ribs. Your watch, a voice says, already walking away to collapse into the bedroll you'd just vacated. You sit up, disoriented, trying to remember where you are. Right, the trail, the cattle, the endless prairie. You pull on your boots, which you'd foolishly taken off, and immediately regret it. Your feet have already swollen from the day's riding, and forcing them back into leather is agony. Here's the brutal arithmetic of night watch on a cattle drive. With 12 men and cattle that need monitoring all night, you're looking at 2-hour shifts on a rotating schedule. That means you'll be woken up twice per night, every night, for the entire drive. 6 hours of potential sleep broken into 2 3-hour chunks. And that's assuming nothing goes wrong. When things go wrong, sleep becomes theoretical rather than actual. Detailed accounts from trail drivers described the fog of exhaustion that descended after the first week. Your body never fully rested. You existed in a state of perpetual semi-consciousness, awake enough to function, but never alert enough to think clearly. Cowboys made mistakes, fell off horses, let cattle wander off, all because their minds were too clouded by fatigue to process information properly. You stumble toward your horse, one of the night horses kept saddled and ready. The animal is as tired as you are, standing with its head lowered, eyes half closed. You haul yourself into the saddle, every muscle in your body protesting. Your inner thighs are raw from 12 hours of riding today. Your back feels like it's been beaten with clubs, but complaining is pointless, so you don't. The night is alive with sounds. The constant low murmur of 3,000 cattle, restless and shifting. The occasional bellow as a cow protests some minor grievance. The whisper of wind through the grass. And underneath it all, a tension, a feeling that something could explode into chaos at any moment. Cattle stampedes usually started at night. A sudden sound, a flash of lightning, even just the collective nervousness of the herd reaching a breaking point, and suddenly 3,000 animals would be running in blind panic. A quirky but terrifying detail from cowboy memoirs. Many men described having nightmares about stampedes, even years after leaving the trail. The sound of hooves thundering and darkness, the dust choking your lungs,
the knowledge that if your horse stumbled, you'd be trampled to death. These images burned into memory and never really left. Some men woke screaming, thrashing in their beds, trapped in dreams of cattle charging past in the black night. You ride slowly around the perimeter of the herd, speaking softly when you get close. Easy there, settle down. The words don't matter, it's the tone, low, calm, monotonous. You're trying to project an atmosphere of peace, of safety, even though you feel neither. The cattle sense your fear, or so veterans claim. If you're nervous, they get nervous. So you fake calm, you fake confidence, and you hope they believe it. Historians note that night watch was where cowboys earned their pay. Anyone could ride during the day, more or less, but keeping cattle calm at night, in complete darkness, often in bad weather, required skill and nerve. You had to trust your horse completely because you couldn't see where you were going. Your horse had to trust you to guide it away from danger. It was a partnership born of necessity, intimate and essential. The other guard is on the opposite side of the herd, invisible in the darkness. You know he's there, can occasionally hear him singing. That's another tradition, cowboys singing to the cattle at night. The songs were usually slow, mournful ballads about lost loves or distant homes. The cattle seemed to find the human voice soothing, or maybe the singing just kept the guards awake. Either way, it became ritual. You try to sing, but your throat is dry and your voice cracks. The song comes out as more of a croak. Still, you persist, because what else are you going to do? The melody is something your mother used to sing, transformed now into a cowboy lullaby for animals that will be slaughtered at the end of the trail. There's an irony in that, but you're too tired to appreciate it. Time moves strangely during night watch. Sometimes it races by and your 2 hours are up before you realize it. Other times, and tonight is one of those times, every minute stretches into eternity. You check the stars, trying to gauge how much time has passed. The Big Dipper has moved maybe a hand's width across the sky. That means 30 minutes, maybe. You have an hour and a half left. It feels impossible.
Cold deepens as the night progresses. Your body, which was warm from the exertion of getting up and saddling the horse, now starts to chill. The wind that seemed tolerable at first now cuts through your clothes like you're wearing nothing. Your fingers go numb on the reins. Your face feels frozen, skin tight and painful. You tuck your chin into your collar and keep riding, keep singing, keep existing. One account from the Goodnight-loving trail describes a guard who fell asleep in his saddle during watch. His horse, bless the animal, kept walking the perimeter, and the cattle stayed calm. But when the relief guard arrived and found the first man unconscious, slumped over his saddle horn, he woke him with a punch. The man was fired the next morning and left to walk back to Texas. It was 70 miles to the nearest town. Nobody knows if he made it. You fight to stay awake, shaking your head, blinking hard, even slapping your own face once when you feel yourself drifting. The consequences of falling asleep are too severe to risk. Not just being fired and abandoned, but the guilt if your failure caused a stampede that killed someone. That weight keeps you upright, keeps your eyes open, even when your body is screaming for rest. Finally, after what feels like years, you see the next guard approaching. Your relief is so intense, it's almost physical. You exchange a few quiet words. All quiet. North End's a bit restless, but nothing serious. He nods, and you turn your horse back toward camp. The ride back takes only minutes, but you barely remember it. You're operating on pure autopilot now. You dismount, unsaddle your horse, and stumble back to your bedroll. You don't even bother to take off your boots this time. You just fall onto your blanket, pull it over yourself, and surrender to unconsciousness. The ground is still hard, the cold is still biting, but none of that matters. Sleep takes you like a drowning victim pulled under a wave, fast and total. But it won't last. In 3 hours, maybe less, that boot will nudge your ribs again, and you'll do it all over. Because this is the life you chose. This is what being a cowboy really means. Not the romance, not the adventure, just endless exhaustion and the grinding repetition
You
of
wake
survival.
to drops of water hitting your face. For a confused moment, you think it's morning dew, but then the rain increases, going from a sprinkle to a downpour in seconds. Around you, cowboys are cursing and scrambling, trying to cover themselves and their gear. You grab your top and pull it over your body, but it's too small to cover both you and your saddle. You choose the saddle. It's worth more than your comfort. Here's what nobody tells you about sleeping outside during the rainy season. There is no staying dry. Your top might keep off the worst of it, but water finds ways. It runs along the ground, pools beneath you, soaks through from below, even as you're trying to block it from above. Within minutes, your blanket is damp. Within an hour, it's soaked. And wet wool, while better than wet cotton, is still miserable.
Accounts from Cattle Drive Chronicles describe rain as the worst enemy of sleep. Cold you could handle, more or less. Heat was uncomfortable, but survivable. But rain, especially prolonged rain, broke men down faster than anything else. You couldn't dry your clothes or bedding. You couldn't get warm. And the dampness worked into your bones, causing aches and illness that compounded over days and weeks. The rain continues all night, relentless and cold. Thunder rolls across the prairie, and with each boom you feel the tension in the camp ratchet higher. Lightning is visible in the distance,
brilliant white forks stabbing down from black clouds. The cattle are awake now, milling and anxious. You know what's coming before it happens. A particularly loud crack of thunder, close enough to shake the ground, and then you hear it. The rumble of thousands of hooves beginning to move. "Stampede!" someone yells, and the camp explodes into action. There's no time to think, no time to prepare. You're on your feet, running for your horse, saddle in hand. Your boots slip in the mud. Rain drives into your face, nearly blinding you. You throw the saddle onto your horse, cinch it as tight as you can with shaking fingers, and vault into the seat. A quirky but terrifying fact from the historical record: more cowboys died in stampedes than from any other single cause on the trail. The cattle, once they started running, were unstoppable. 3,000 animals in full panic could cover miles in minutes, trampling anything in their path. Cowboys had to ride alongside, trying to turn the leaders, trying to get the herd running in a circle until they tired themselves out. It was called milling the herd, and it was as dangerous as it sounds. You kick your horse into a gallop, following the sound of the stampede, since you can barely see 10 feet in the darkness and rain. Other riders materialize out of the storm, ghosts on horseback, all heading in the same direction. Someone is shouting instructions, but the words are torn away by the wind. You just follow, trusting your horse to keep its footing in the treacherous mud. The cattle are a dark river of muscle and horns, flowing across the prairie with terrible momentum. You ride alongside, adding your voice to the others, yelling, trying to get their attention, trying to influence their direction. Your horse is terrified, but obeys your commands, trained for this, even if you're not. Together, you and the animal work to turn the stampede. Historians note that these moments defined the cowboy profession. This was when skill mattered, when courage mattered, when the difference between a good hand and a bad one became life or death. Many greenhorns quit after their first stampede, assuming they survived it. The terror was too much, the danger too real. Only those with nerves of steel, or those too stupid to understand
After
the
what
risk,
feels
stayed.
like hours, but is probably 30 minutes, the cattle begin to slow. The leaders start to circle, and gradually the panic drains out of the herd. They mill around, confused and exhausted, but no longer running. You pull up your horse, gasping for breath, soaked to the skin, shaking with adrenaline. Around you, other cowboys are doing the same. Nobody's hurt, not this time. You got lucky. The ride back to camp is slow and miserable. The rain has finally stopped, but everything is mud. Your bedroll, when you find it, is completely soaked, a sodden lump that barely resembles bedding anymore. You wring out what water you can, but it's pointless. You're going to be sleeping wet tonight, and probably for several nights, until the sun comes back and you get a chance to dry things out. You lie down on the wet blanket, too exhausted to care anymore. Your body heat, what little you have left, starts to warm the fabric slightly,
creating a microclimate of damp warmth that's somehow worse than just being cold and dry. But sleep comes anyway, because your body has reached its limit. The discomfort fades into background noise, and unconsciousness claims you. The next morning, you wake to a world of mud. The cattle are scattered, and it will take most of the day to round them up. Your clothes are still wet. Your blanket is still wet. Everything you own is wet. But there's no time to complain. The trail boss is already barking orders. You saddle up and ride out, leaving your bedroll to sit in what weak sunlight manages to break through the clouds. Historians document that rainy periods during drives could set the schedule back by days or even weeks. Wet conditions meant slower travel, more stampedes, higher risk of illness. Cowboys developed pneumonia, rheumatism, and other ailments that would plague them for life, but they couldn't stop. The cattle had to reach market. The money had to be made. So they pushed on, wet and miserable, until the weather finally changed. As the day progresses, you think about the night ahead. Your bedroll will still be wet. It might be wet for days. And tonight, you'll lie down on it again, and the cold dampness will soak into your bones again, and you'll shiver through your few hours of sleep. It's not a future you look forward to, but it's the only future you have. The romance of the cowboy life, you think bitterly, is something invented by people who never lived it. The reality is cold rain, wet blankets, exhaustion so deep you can't remember your own name, and danger that can kill you in seconds. But you signed up for this, and you'll see it through, because quitting means walking home in shame, and that, somehow, seems worse than anything the trail
The
can throw at
rain
you.
is a distant memory now. For the past week, the sun has beaten down relentlessly, turning the prairie into an oven. The grass is brown and brittle. The ground is hard as stone, cracked into irregular patterns that trip your horse if you're not careful. And the dust, my God, the dust is everywhere. It hangs in the air like a fog, kicked up by thousands of hooves, coating everything in a fine grit that gets into your eyes, your mouth, your lungs. Here's another truth about sleeping on the trail. Heat was just as much an enemy as cold, maybe worse. When you were cold, you could add layers, huddle together, try to generate warmth. But when you were hot, there was nothing you could do. You couldn't remove clothes beyond a certain point, not with any sense of modesty. You couldn't escape the sun during the day. And at night, the heat lingered, radiating up from the ground, making sleep nearly impossible. Detailed accounts from cowboys on summer drives describe the special torture of trying to sleep in heat. The air was so hot it felt solid, pressing down on you like a weight. Your blanket, which you needed as padding against the hard ground, became a furnace that trapped your body heat. You'd lie there, sweat pouring off you,
every breath feeling like you were inhaling from an oven. And the mosquitoes, drawn by the sweat, would descend in clouds, biting every exposed inch of skin. You picture yourself now, lying on your bedroll as the sun sets, but the temperature barely drops. The sky is a deep orange, cloudless, and offering no hope of relief. Around you, other cowboys are stripping down to undershirts, trying to cool off. Some have given up on blankets entirely and are just lying on their tarps, accepting the discomfort of rocks and roots in exchange for slightly less heat. Your throat is parched. Water has been scarce for days. The last creek you crossed was almost dry, just a trickle of muddy water that the cattle churned into an undrinkable soup. Your canteen is nearly empty, and you're rationing what's left, taking only small sips, even though your body is screaming for more. Thirst, you've learned, is a special kind of agony. It's not sharp like pain from an injury. It's dull and constant, a gnawing need that dominates every thought. Historians document that water management was one of the biggest challenges of the long drives. The routes were planned around known water sources, rivers, creeks, springs, but those sources weren't always reliable. A drought could dry up a creek that had flowed for decades. A herd ahead of you could foul a spring beyond use. And if you miscalculated, if you went too long between water, both cattle and men could die. A quirky but grim detail from the records: cowboys sometimes drank cattle blood when water ran out. They'd cut a vein in a steer's neck, catch some blood in a cup, and drink it warm. It was disgusting, they all agreed, but it kept you alive. The salt content was problematic, making you thirstier in the long run, but in the short term, it was liquid, and liquid was
You lie
life.
there, trying to will yourself to sleep, despite the heat and thirst. The dust in your lungs makes you cough, a dry, hacking sound. Everyone is coughing. It's the constant soundtrack of the camp. Dozens of men clearing their throats, spitting out brown phlegm, trying to dislodge the grit that's embedded in their respiratory systems. Some men developed chronic lung problems from the dust, problems that will follow them for the rest of their lives. The cattle are restless in the heat too. You can hear them moving, lowing, unhappy but too exhausted to stampede. They're suffering just as much as you are, maybe more. Their tongues hang out, swollen and dry. Their eyes are dull. Tomorrow, when you resume the drive, some of the weaker ones won't make it. They'll collapse and die, and the herd will just keep moving, leaving the bodies for the scavengers. Around midnight, the temperature finally starts to drop. Not much, but enough that you can breathe a little easier. You drift into an uneasy sleep, dreams filled with images of water, clear streams, cold and pure, rain falling on your upturned face, even the ocean, which you've never seen but have heard described.
Your subconscious mind is torturing you with fantasies of the one thing you can't have. You wake before dawn, mouth so dry your tongue is stuck to the roof of your mouth. You take a tiny sip from your canteen, swish it around, savor it before swallowing. That's it. That's all you allow yourself. The next water source is maybe a day away. If the trail boss's memory is accurate, you have to make this last. Historians note that the psychological impact of thirst was almost as bad as the physical impact. Men became irritable, paranoid, sometimes violent. Fights broke out over water rights, over who drank too much, over imagined slights. The trail boss had to maintain strict control, rationing water like a tyrant, because without discipline, the crew would tear itself apart. As the sun rises, you feel your heart sink. Another day of this, another day of heat and dust and thirst, another night of trying to sleep through conditions that make rest impossible. You wonder how much more you can take. You wonder how much more your body can endure before it just gives up. But you don't say these things out loud. You just saddle up, mount your horse, and ride out to gather the herd, because that's what you do. That's what cowboys do. They endure. As you settle into your bedroll for the night, you go through the now familiar ritual of checking for unwanted visitors. You shake out your blanket vigorously, watching for scorpions that might have crawled into the folds during the day. You inspect the ground beneath your tarp, looking for anthills, snake holes, or anything else that might bring pain in the darkness. And you stuff rags into the tops of your boots, which you'll use as a pillow to keep things from crawling inside while you sleep.
Here's a fact that veteran cowboys all agreed on. The real dangers of the trail weren't the dramatic ones you'd expect. It wasn't outlaws or Indians or wild animals that killed most men. It was the small things. The scorpion in your boot, the rattlesnake coiled under a rock near your bedroll, the infected insect bite that turned septic. Death came quietly, in tiny packages, while you slept or weren't paying attention. Detailed accounts from trail journals describe the constant battle against insects. Mosquitoes were perhaps the worst, swarming in clouds near any water source. They'd cover every exposed inch of skin, biting relentlessly. Some men wrapped cloth around their faces, looking like bandits, just to keep the mosquitoes out of their eyes and mouths. But cloth made breathing difficult and sleeping almost impossible, so most just endured the bites, waking up in the morning covered in welts, itching so badly they drew blood with their scratching. Fire ants were another nightmare. They built their mounds in the grasslands, and if you accidentally bedded down near one, you'd wake up covered in the vicious insects, each bite feeling like a hot needle. One account describes a cowboy who rolled onto an ant mound in his sleep. He woke up screaming,
his body covered in hundreds of bites. His face swelled so badly he couldn't see for 2 days. He had to ride blind, trusting his horse to follow the herd while his body fought off the toxins. Ticks were everywhere, especially in tall grass. They'd crawl onto you during the day and burrow into your skin, gorging on your blood. You had to check yourself every night, running your hands over your body, feeling for the hard little lumps. When you found one, you had to remove it carefully, making sure the head came out, because if it broke off under the skin, infection was almost guaranteed. Most cowboys had dozens of tick bites at any given time, angry red circles that itched and ached. A quirky but disturbing detail from the records. Some men developed such severe reactions to repeated tick bites that they became allergic. Their skin would break out in rashes. Their joints would swell, and in rare cases, they'd develop fevers that lasted for weeks. There was no treatment except rest, which wasn't an option on a cattle drive. You either pushed through or you died. Those were the choices. You picture yourself now, lying on your bedroll, hyper-aware of every sensation on your skin. Is that tickle on your arm an insect or just a blade of grass? Is that pressure on your leg a rock or something alive? You slap at your neck, crushing a mosquito, feeling the wet smear of your own blood. Around you, other cowboys are doing the same, a constant symphony of slaps and curses.
Snakes were perhaps the most feared danger. Rattlesnakes were common on the plains, and they were active at night when the ground cooled down. They'd seek out warm places, and a sleeping human body was extremely attractive to a cold-blooded reptile. Cowboys told horror stories around the fire, tales of men who woke up to find rattlesnakes coiled on their chests, drawn by their body heat. Most of these stories were probably exaggerated, but the fear was real. One verified account from the Chisholm Trail describes a cowboy who was bitten on the hand while sleeping. He woke up to searing pain and the sound of rattles. By the time he killed the snake and raised the alarm, his hand had already started to swell. The trail boss did what little he could, cutting an X over the bite and trying to suck out the venom, but it was largely futile. The cowboy's arm swelled to twice its normal size, turned black and purple, and he developed a fever that nearly killed him. He survived, but lost 2 fingers to gangrene. The lack of medical care meant that even minor injuries could become life-threatening. An insect bite that got infected, a scratch from a thorn bush that wouldn't heal, a blister that burst and filled with pus. Any break in the skin was a potential entry point for infection, and infection, without antibiotics, could spread rapidly. You learned to be obsessive about even tiny wounds, washing them with whatever clean water you could find, covering them with cloth torn from your already ragged clothes. Historians note that cowboys had to develop a kind of paranoid vigilance about their sleeping areas. They learned to read the landscape, to avoid certain spots instinctively. Low ground where water collected and insects bred. Areas with lots of rocks where snakes like to hide. Tall grass where ticks waited. Finding a good spot to bed down became an art form, a skill that separated the experienced hands from the greenhorns. You shift position on your bedroll, and something scurries away in the darkness. Your heart hammers. Was that a scorpion? A tarantula? Just a beetle? You'll never know. You force yourself to lie still, to breathe slowly, to not let fear paralyze you. If you spent every night terrified of what might crawl on you, you'd never sleep. You have to accept the risk. Accept that you're sharing this space with creatures that can hurt or kill you, and trust that luck will keep you safe. Around the camp, you hear the occasional yelp or curse as someone encounters something unpleasant. "Scorpion," someone shouts, followed by the sound of a boot repeatedly hitting the ground. The threat is neutralized, but your own anxiety increases. If there's one scorpion, there are probably more. You tuck your blanket tighter around your body, trying to minimize exposed skin, but it's impossible to cover
The
everything.
psychological toll of this constant, low-level threat was significant. Many cowboys developed sleep disorders that lasted long after they left the trail. They'd wake up dozens of times per night, jerking awake with the sensation of something crawling on them. Some men became so paranoid they refused to sleep lying down, instead dozing while sitting up with their backs against trees or rocks, convinced it was safer. As the night wears on, you feel something on your face. You swat at it instinctively, and your hand comes away with the crushed body of a large moth. Relief floods through you. Just a moth. Not a spider, not a scorpion, not anything dangerous. Just a harmless insect drawn to the smell of your sweat. But your heart is still racing, adrenaline coursing through your system, and now sleep feels even more distant. You think about the men who'd quit the trail, walking away from their pay, from their pride, because they couldn't handle the conditions. You judged them before, thought them weak. Now, lying in the darkness, surrounded by threats you can't see, you understand their decision a little better. There's courage in endurance, yes, but there's also courage in knowing when to walk away. The question is, which one are you? For now, you choose to stay. You close your eyes, ignore the itching, ignore the tickling sensations, ignore the fear. You slow your breathing, relax your muscles, and surrender to whatever the night brings. If something bites you, you'll deal with it when it happens. Until then, you need sleep.
Your body needs rest. And so you let go, sliding into unconsciousness despite everything, because the alternative is staying awake all night, and that way lies madness. You lie awake long after the others have fallen asleep, staring up at the vast expanse of stars. The silence is profound, broken only by the sounds of the cattle and the occasional snore from a nearby cowboy. Despite being surrounded by people and animals, you feel utterly alone. It's a loneliness that goes deeper than physical isolation, a sense of being disconnected from everything familiar, everything human, everything that once mattered. Here's something the romantic stories about cowboys never mention: the psychological damage of the long drives. You spent months isolated from civilization, from women, from family, from any softness or comfort. Your companions were rough men with whom you had little in common beyond survival. Your days were filled with brutality and exhaustion, and your nights offered no escape, just more hardship in a different form. Detailed accounts from cowboys who kept journals reveal the depth of this isolation. They wrote about homesickness so intense it felt like a physical pain in their chests. They wrote about forgetting how to hold normal conversations, how their social skills atrophied from disuse. They wrote about becoming more like animals than men, responding only to basic needs: food, water, sleep, survival. The humanity drained out of them, day by day,
Many
mile
men talked
by
to
mile.
themselves, carrying on elaborate conversations because they had no one else to talk to. The work of driving cattle required little communication, just hand signals and occasional shouted instructions. Days could pass without anyone speaking to you directly. In that vacuum, your inner voice became the only voice, and sometimes that voice turned dark, feeding you thoughts of failure, worthlessness, despair. A quirky but sad observation from the historical record. Some cowboys became so attached to their horses that they talked to the animals as if they were people. They'd share their thoughts, their fears, their hopes with a horse that couldn't understand, but at least wouldn't judge. One man wrote that his horse knew him better than any human ever had, knew his moods, his limits, his character. When that horse died crossing a swollen river, the cowboy wrote that he cried for the first time since childhood. You picture yourself in this moment, feeling the weight of all those accumulated days of isolation pressing down. You think about home, but the memories are already fading, becoming dreamlike and unreal. Did you really once sleep in a bed? Did you really once sit at a table and eat hot food? Did you really once have conversations about things that weren't cattle or weather or survival? It seems impossible, like stories from someone else's life. Historians note that many cowboys never readjusted to normal society after their time on the trail. They return to towns and find themselves unable to relate to the people there. The concerns of civilized life seemed trivial, meaningless. They'd become addicted to the simplicity of the trail, where everything was reduced to basics, where your worth was measured only in your ability to endure. Some men spent their entire lives chasing that feeling, going on drive after drive, never settling, never building anything permanent. The lack of female companionship was another source of psychological strain. Months without seeing a woman, without hearing a feminine voice, without experiencing any kind of gentleness or emotional connection, turned men rough and crude. They forgot how to interact with women, became awkward and aggressive. Some developed such resentment toward the civilized world, represented by women and families and domestic life, that they could not reintegrate. Around you, men are sleeping, but you can hear occasional sounds that suggest not everyone is resting peacefully. Someone is crying, very quietly, trying to muffle the sound in his blanket. Someone else is muttering, caught in a nightmare, reliving some trauma. The old veteran 3 bedrolls away hasn't moved or made a sound all night, and you wonder if he's sleeping or just lying there staring into the darkness like you are. You think about the men who'd broken completely on the trail, the ones who'd wandered off during a night watch and never returned, choosing to face the wilderness alone rather than continue with the herd. The ones who'd picked fights with fellow cowboys, seemingly trying to get killed. The ones who'd simply stopped functioning, lying in their bedrolls, refusing to get up, refusing to eat, willing themselves
The trail boss
to
had
die.
no patience for such men. If you couldn't work, you were dead weight, consuming resources and contributing nothing. You'd be left behind with whatever supplies could be spared, maybe pointed toward the nearest settlement, and that was it. Most of those men probably died, lost in the vast empty spaces between towns. Their bodies would never be found, their fates never known. As you lie there, you conduct a mental inventory of your own state. Are you breaking? Are you approaching your limit? You search for signs, irrational thoughts, uncontrollable emotions, the desire to simply give up. You find evidence of all of these, but whether they represent normal trail fatigue or something more serious, you can't tell. The line between endurance and breakdown is thin and hard to see from the middle of it. Historians document that the suicide rate among cowboys was high, both during drives and in the years afterward. The combination of physical hardship, isolation, and trauma created conditions perfect for despair. Many men saw no future beyond the trail, no hope of ever escaping the cycle of suffering. For them, death seemed preferable to continuing, and they chose it quietly and without fanfare. You force these dark thoughts away, focusing instead on practical matters. How many more weeks until the trail ends? Maybe 6, maybe 8, depending on conditions. Can you make it that long? You have to. There's no alternative. The pay waiting at the end, $30 if you're lucky, represents your only chance at having anything, at being anything. Without it, you're back to being nobody, drifting from job to job, town to town, never accumulating anything, never building anything. The stars wheel slowly overhead, indifferent to your suffering.
The universe is vast and you are small, insignificant, easily replaceable. If you died tomorrow, the trail would continue. Another man would take your spot. The cattle would still reach market. Your absence would leave no mark on the world. It's a depressing thought, but also strangely liberating. If nothing you do matters, then you're free to simply exist, to survive for its own sake. Around 3 in the morning, you finally slip into sleep, not because your mind has quieted, but because your body simply can't stay awake any longer. The sleep is shallow and troubled, filled with dreams of endless prairies and cattle that stampede in circles forever, going nowhere. You wake feeling more exhausted than when you lay down, but that's normal now. Every day you wake up tired. Every night you go to sleep tired. Tiredness is your baseline existence. And somehow, impossibly, you keep going. Because that's what you do. You endure. You survive. You push down the darkness and focus on the next task, the next day, the next mile. The psychological damage accumulates, yes, but you'll worry about that later, if there is a later. For now, survival is enough.
Morning comes, and with it a small mercy. The cook has managed to brew coffee, real coffee, strong and bitter and scalding hot. You wrap your hands around the tin cup, feeling the warmth seep into your frozen fingers, and take a careful sip. It burns your tongue, but you don't care. For a moment, just a brief moment, something is right with the world. Here's something important about the cattle drive experience. Despite the isolation, despite the hardships, or maybe because of them, bonds formed between the men on the trail. You might not like your companions. You might not have anything in common with them beyond this shared misery, but you trusted them with your life, and they trusted you with theirs, and that created a connection deeper than friendship. Detailed accounts from cowboys describe this paradoxical relationship. Men who couldn't stand each other personally would still risk their lives to save one another during a stampede or a river crossing. They'd share their last water, split their meager rations, take extra watch shifts when someone was sick or injured, not out of affection necessarily, but out of recognition that they were all in this together, that survival depended on cooperation. The campfire in the morning became a ritual of bonding. Men would gather, drinking coffee, not saying much, just existing in each other's presence. Sometimes someone would tell a joke, usually crude and not particularly funny, but everyone would laugh anyway, because laughter was precious, a reminder that they were still human. Sometimes someone would share a memory from home, and others would listen silently, offering no comment, but absorbing the story like starving men absorbing food. A quirky observation from the journals. Cowboys developed their own language, a mixture of trail slang, Spanish words picked up from the vaqueros, and terms specific to their crew. An outsider listening to their conversations would barely understand them, but among themselves, communication was efficient and precise. A single word could convey complex information: the state of the herd, the quality of grass ahead, the mood of the trail boss. You sit now with your coffee, watching the other men around the fire. The young kid from Missouri, barely 17, who still hasn't hardened completely, who still talks about the girl he left behind. The vaquero, older and wise, who can read weather and cattle better than anyone. The freed slave who works twice as hard for half the recognition, trying to prove his worth in a world that doesn't want to see it. Historians note that the cattle drive crews were remarkably diverse for the time period. Economic necessity overrode prejudice, at least partially. If a man could do the work, his race or background mattered less than it would in settled society. That's not to say there wasn't racism or discrimination. There absolutely was. But survival created a baseline of grudging respect. The trail was an equalizer. It broke everyone, regardless
The trail
of who
boss
they were.
walks over, his presence changing the atmosphere immediately. He's a hard man, fair but unforgiving, and everyone straightens up slightly when he approaches. "We've got a long day ahead," he says, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over wind and cattle. "River crossing this afternoon. Everyone needs to be sharp." A murmur of acknowledgement. River crossings were dangerous, another roll of the dice that could end in death. You exchange glances with the man next to you, the German immigrant. No words are necessary. You both understand what "be sharp" means. It means stay alert. It means help each other. It means if someone goes down, you pull them out, even at risk to yourself. It's the unspoken code of the trail, the only thing keeping this collection of desperate men functioning as a unit. As the day progresses, you see that code in action. A horse stumbles, nearly throwing its rider. 2 men immediately ride over to help, steadying the animal, making sure the cowboy is uninjured. Later, when the herd has to be pushed through a narrow canyon, everyone works in silent coordination, each person knowing their role, anticipating what others will do. It's not coordination born of practice or training. It's coordination born of necessity and shared understanding. The river crossing, when it comes, is as bad as expected. The water is high and fast, the current dangerous. The cattle balk at the edge, afraid to enter. It takes an hour of shouting and whipping to get the first animals into the water. Once they commit, the rest follow, and suddenly 3,000 cattle are swimming, their heads bobbing in the brown water, their eyes showing white with terror. You're in the water too, mounted on your horse, trying to keep the cattle moving in the right direction. The current pulls at you, trying to sweep you downstream. Your horse is swimming, just barely keeping its head above water. Around you, other cowboys are doing the same, and you can see the fear on their faces, the same fear you feel. One mistake, one moment of bad luck, and you'll be under the hooves, drowning in muddy water. A shout goes up. Someone's in trouble.
You see a horse without a rider, swimming frantically. The cowboy is 20 yards downstream, head disappearing under the water. Without thinking, you angle your horse toward him, fighting the current. Another cowboy does the same from the opposite direction. Together, you reach the drowning man, grabbing his arms, pulling him up. He coughs and sputters, but he's alive. You haul him across your horse in front of your saddle and make for the shore. On the bank, the rescued man collapses, vomiting water. No one says anything. The trail boss checks him over, determines he'll live, and orders everyone back to work. There's no celebration, no backslapping or congratulations. What happened was normal, expected. You'd risked your life to save his, because that's what you do. If positions were reversed, he'd do the same for you. It's not heroism, it's just
As
the
the day
code.
ends and you bed down again, you feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the conditions, which remain miserable, not for the work, which remains brutal, but for these men around you, these strangers who've become something more than friends. They're your tribe, your pack, bonded by shared suffering. You know each other in ways that go beyond words or conventional relationships. You realize that years from now, if you survive this drive, these will be the men you remember, not the details of where you went or what you saw, but these faces, these personalities, these moments of silent cooperation and mutual rescue. The trail is hell, yes, but hell shared is somehow more bearable than paradise experienced alone. And so you close your eyes, surrounded by sleeping cowboys, and for once the loneliness doesn't feel quite so crushing. You're part of something, even if that something is just a group of desperate men trying not to die. It's not much, but it's enough. For tonight, it's enough. Weeks have passed, though you've lost count of exactly how many. The days blend together, an endless loop of riding, sleeping, eating, surviving. But now, finally, you can see the end. The railhead town appears on the horizon, a collection of buildings that represents civilization, safety, and the completion of your journey. The cattle smell it too, or sense it somehow, and pick up their pace slightly, eager to reach whatever destination awaits them. Here's what nobody tells you about finishing a cattle drive. You don't feel triumph or accomplishment. You feel numb, hollowed out, barely recognizable as the person who started the journey. Your body has changed, lean and hard, burned dark by the sun, scarred by countless small injuries. Your mind has changed too, in ways you don't fully understand yet, won't understand for years maybe. Detailed accounts from cowboys describe the strange anticlimax of arrival. After months of struggle, of fighting for every mile, you simply
stop. The cattle are driven into holding pens. The trail boss negotiates with buyers. Money changes hands, and you stand there, filthy and exhausted, waiting to be paid for your labor. $30 if you're lucky. Less if the trail boss decides to dock you for imagined infractions. You picture yourself now, receiving your pay. The coins are heavy in your hand, represent 3 months of suffering distilled into metal. It doesn't seem like enough, could never be enough to compensate for what you've endured. But it's what you have, and you'll take it, because the alternative is nothing. Most cowboys immediately head for the saloon, spending their entire pay in a few days of drinking and gambling and women, trying to forget the trail. Then they're broke again, and they sign up for another drive, because it's the only work they know.
Tonight, as you rest in whatever comfort you have, spare a thought for those cowboys, for the men who slept on the ground for months at a time, who faced every hardship nature could throw at them, and who somehow kept going. Their nights were long and cold and lonely, but they made it through, and so can you. Sleep well wherever you are, and remember, if cowboys could sleep on cattle drives, you can sleep through whatever challenges your own night brings. The human capacity for endurance is greater than we imagine. We can survive more than we think. We can sleep even when sleep seems impossible. Good night, friends. Until the next story, rest easy. You've earned it. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed these stories, please like the video and subscribe for more relaxing history content. Sleep peacefully, and we'll see you in the next tale. Good night.